Okay. All set. Okay. So good morning, directors and guests and staff. As this meeting gets underway, I would like to acknowledge that we are on the unceded traditional territory of the Comox First Nation. My name is James Warren, and as the Corporate Legislative Officer, I will call this inaugural meeting of the Comox Strathcona Regional Hospital District to order. Thank you to everyone for attending this meeting today. So the first order of business at inaugural board meetings is to conduct the election of the chair and vice chair. I will begin by calling for nominations for the position of chair. Any directors may put forward another director's name. Each time a director is nominated, Jake will note his or her last name. I will call for nominations 3 times, and at the close of nominations, I will ask each nominee, in reverse order from which they are nominated, if they will let their name stand for election. If more than one director is nominated, each candidate will have 3 minutes to make a campaign presentation. Following the speeches, we will conduct the election by way of an email to each of you requesting your vote through an online poll. Please enter an alias in the poll so that your vote secrecy is preserved, and make your selection for chair or vice chair and press the send button. When all of the votes are submitted, Mariah Fort, Jake Martins, and myself, as statutory officers, will count the ballots, and I will then announce the results. If you experience any technical difficulties in submitting your vote, you can text me directly. If there are more than 2 candidates and no candidate receives a clear majority of votes on the first ballot, the candidate with the lowest number of votes will be removed and the voting will be conducted again. This process will be used until there is 1 candidate who receives a clear majority of ballots cast. If there are 2 tie votes, the board will have to pass a resolution to either determine the election of the chair by drawing lots or to start the election process over. The process for the election of the vice chair is the same as I've just described. However, candidates will be allowed just 2 minutes for their speech. And following the elections, I will ask for a resolution to destroy the voting results. Are there any questions? I see Director Unger, you have your hand up. Is that a question, or will you be making a nomination?
Making a nomination, James.
All right, thank you. Director Evans, do you have any questions? No, okay.
No, I don't. Just supporting a nomination.
Great, thank you. So then I will open the floor to nominations for the position of chair of the Comox Strathcona Regional Hospital District Board of Directors. Director Unger.
Thank you, James. I'd like to nominate Director Cornfield.
Director Cornfield, and I will call a second time for nominations for the position of chair. Director Evans.
I'll lower my hand. That was going to be my nomination as well. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. And I'll call a third and final time for any nominations for the position of chair. Seeing no further nominations, Director Cornfield, do you allow your name to stand for the position of chair?
I do.
Very good, thank you. Then I'm pleased to announce that you have been acclaimed as the chair of the Comox Strathcona Regional Hospital District Board of Directors for 2021. Congratulations.
Thank you. And thank you for your support, board.
So I'll now open the floor for nominations for the position of vice chair. Director Morin.
I'll nominate Director Hillian, please.
Very good. And I'll call a second time for any nominations for vice chair. Director Grieve, I see your hand is up. No? I'll call a third and final time for any nominations for the position of vice chair. Seeing no further nominations, Director Hillian, do you allow your name to stand for that position of vice chair?
I do, thank you.
Good, then I'm pleased to announce you have been acclaimed as the vice chair for the Comox Strathcona Regional Hospital District for 2021. Congratulations.
Thanks very much.
With that, I will turn the floor over to Mr. Chair to get this meeting underway.
All righty, and welcome and thank you very much, board, for your show of support for both myself and Doug. And our first item is the adoption of the minutes.
Move adoption.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, call a question. Is there anyone opposed? Hearing nothing, we will declare that one adopted.
Mr. Chair, sorry to interrupt. This is Jake. I see Director Abram has his hand up.
Sorry. Director
Yeah,
Abram?
Charlie, if you're going to be our new chair, you got to look at the board.
Well, I had my board.
I do not have anything on the minutes, but I do not see an adoption of public agenda. Maybe I haven't looked down far enough yet, but I have one item that I would like to add that I sent an email to Jake earlier. I sent an email to you weeks ago, and it was 2 photos, and I would like that brought up. A very quick item.
This morning.
And if you could put that on. I think Jake has it before him.
Jake?
I'd have to just check my email. I can only confirm that I just received an email just prior to the start of this meeting. But if Director Abram wishes to put forward the addition of an item to the agenda, the board can accept that with a majority vote.
Okay. Where is our agenda?
Yeah, I think I'm trying to share it here. I'm not sure if all the directors are able to see that, but there's a new business section in which an item could be added to with the support of the board.
Okay. Jim, are you comfortable with it as new business?
Yeah, that's fine. Wherever,
Okay.
just.
And do you want to give us just a short little, I mean, really short?
Yeah, real quickie, the plaque that commemorated the building of the 2 hospitals. There's a plaque with everybody's name that was on the board at the time. And the one in the Campbell River Hospital is placed in a very, very conspicuous spot. And there is a very, very conspicuous spot about 2 feet away from it. And I would just like to have Rehab move that.
Okay. So we'll cover that under new business then. Thank you. That's with the approval of the board, right? So I have to call a question on adding that as a new business item. So is there any discussion? Seeing none, call a question. Is there anyone opposed?
Opposed.
One opposed. I believe that was Director Anderson or Adams.
Correct.
Okay. I'm just trying to get my screen to show the list of names.
Chair, if I can speak to my opposition.
Okay, please speak quickly.
I certainly appreciate, but the focus of today's meeting is strategic planning, and I don't see an urgency on this, and think it could be deferred to the next meeting.
Okay, thank you. So are you moving a motion of deferral?
No.
Okay. Any further discussion on the addition of new business item by Director Abram? Seeing none, call a question. Is there anyone opposed? And I have Director Adams opposed. Seeing no more in opposition, I'll declare that item added to new business. Okay, our first item, business arising from the minutes. None. Petitions and delegations, none. Reports, the management report.
Move receipt. Second.
Thank you. Any discussion on the management report?
I just had one question on the management report. The management report refers to service level needs. And since we are not mandated to be involved in service operations of healthcare facilities, I think that should be referring to future capital needs rather than service level needs.
Okay. Is there any further?
Yeah, and I mean, we'll be speaking about it at the strategic plan today, but I think we have plenty to do with capital equipment and structures without getting involved in services.
Okay, I think it's prime to bring it up today at the when we get into our strategic planning discussion. So on receipt of the management report, is there any other discussion?
Oh, that's the number I tried, Louise.
Pardon me?
I got my hand up.
Whose hand is up now? Because I'm not, I only got about 2, 4, 6 on the, on my little sheet at a time. So Jake, can you keep me on
You got a
track
little
here?
scroll bar on the
Certainly.
side.
That's Director Abram,
Scroll
Chair.
bar on the
Okay. So Director Abram?
Yeah, just on Director Lee's comment, in reading through the materials today, capital and operations are mentioned continuously. So, you know, I guess this is a good topic for later on.
Yep.
But it's there. You know, if it's in the act and it's in the whatever the operations or the way of doing business, then I guess we have to consider it.
And that's why we're having our strategic session on this meeting and the next meeting of the board. So there's no further discussion on the management report, I'll call a question on receipt. Is there anyone opposed? Hearing none. The management report has been received, and we'll move on to item 2, the audit service plan. And my understanding is we have Ms. Fort going to speak to this one.
Move receipt.
Second.
Okay. James or?
Thank you,
or
Mr.
Jake?
Chair. Mariah Fort, our Chief Financial Officer, will introduce our auditor in this case. Mariah?
Thank you, James. Through the chair, we do have Corey Vanderhorst here to present the audit service plan from our independent auditor, MMP, today.
Thank you, Mariah. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Good. I see you have time. Thank you, Director Lee. I won't take up too much time. I know you have a busy agenda. You have the audit service plan in your package. We're coming up to, I think, year 5 on our audit mandate with the hospital district. There is essentially no change from the plan, the audit plan and approach for 2020. Of course, with the one item being in the pandemic, we will be restricting or virtually eliminating our on-site presence in the region district offices. We'll do as much as we can remotely through secure and confidential client portal and sharing of documents. I'd like to thank staff, hospital district staff, and for working with us on that digital platform and sharing documents digitally. So I'll open for questions if there are any from the directors.
Hey, questions of Mr. Vanderhorst? Does anybody have their hand up?
None at this point, Mr. Chair.
Okay. I had just had one question, Corey, and that's on audit materiality. Could you sort of explain where we propose to use the $675,000 as overall materiality for audit planning purposes?
Absolutely. Yeah, the $675,000 we're proposing would be roughly 4% of your annual revenues for the hospital district. That's been consistent with the last few years. And then what that means is we're looking at every transaction over that level. And underneath that, we are sampling. Given the nature of the hospital district and the large dollar values of requisitions and transfers and things, and the debt that's in place, we're checking most of those things with a fine-tooth comb. There's not a lot that goes under that radar. A little bit on the income statement, perhaps, but we feel like we get fairly good coverage at that level of the debt, the requisitions, and the transfer payments to Island.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no further questions on receipt of the audit service plan. All in favor? Or sorry, is there anyone opposed? And hearing none, we'll declare the audit service plan received. And now I'm moving into our strategic planning session. James, just for clarity, are you going to introduce the session, or is Allison, or how do you want to deal with this part?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I think at the outset here, I will introduce Allison Habkirk. Allison's going to run through the today and provide an overview of today and then February's date. And then Allison, I think, will carry on from there and introduce a couple other speakers and then get into the briefing notes from there. So
would it be appropriate to welcome the Island Health people at this time?
Certainly.
Okay. And so welcome Island Health, and thank you very much, Leah, for participating today. And I think, you know, it's about building relationships and about what we can accomplish when we all work together. So I'm really glad that you and your staff members were able to participate today.
Thank you.
Is there anything you wanted to say?
Oh, okay. Do you want me to go ahead?
Maybe this is Allison Habkirk here.
Yep.
Maybe what I could do is just introduce the session, and then I'll turn it over to you, Leah, if that works for you.
Sounds
you
good. Sorry, Allison.
Now, can you?
No,
I seem to have found myself on mute somehow. My fault, not yours.
Well, we can hear you. We can hear you fine.
Perfect. Thank you.
There's a lot of moving parts to this meeting, so we're all. It takes a village to make this happen. Yeah, I just wanted to just spend a minute or two to just talk about the greater process that we're involved in, what's going to happen today, what's going to happen in February. So the plan for today is that we will hear from the chair of Island Health, and then James is going to just speak briefly to the Regional Hospital District mandate. We'll take a quick break somewhere around 10:30. We are going to go through the briefing notes that we circulated. We just thought we would walk through them, provide an opportunity for Island Health to add any comments they'd like to add. They have seen them, they have reviewed them. So, but there may be questions, there may be comments that they want to make. And then we are going to use breakout rooms in Zoom, and we have created 4 breakout rooms with the intention of trying to geographically distribute the directors into the breakout rooms. There'll be a member of the hospital district staff and Island Health in each of the groups. And then we'll come back for a plenary discussion at the end of today. And then the intention is for me to meet with groups of directors between now and February. Our next meeting is going to be February 25th. And we will come back then to really try to make some decisions about the direction that the Regional Hospital District wants to take. Today really is about trying to get some foundational information on the table for the directors, answer any questions, have some discussion. We'll gather some more information between now and February 25th, and then we'll come together in February again to make some decisions about the future direction of the hospital district. So with that, I think I can turn it over to Chair Hollins. And Chair, perhaps I could just ask you to introduce the other members of your Island Health staff that are here with us today.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. And I think it's still January, so I want to wish you all a happy new year. I expect that this year will be different than last. I'm hoping for that anyway, as I'm sure the rest of you are. And so Scott and Max, I can't see very many people. So I don't know whether Scott and Max, you can give people a wave so they'll know that you're here. But I'm delighted that you're here I want to start by acknowledging with respect and gratitude the Lekwungen peoples of the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations, whose traditional territory I am calling from today. I also acknowledge the many nations within the Vancouver Island Nation family, First Nations families of the Coast Salish, Nuu-chah-nulth, and Kwakiakwa peoples who have cared and nurtured this land for all time, and give thanks for welcoming us as visitors to live, work, and care. And I recognize the Métis, Inuit, and other Indigenous peoples on Vancouver Island. So I'm really delighted to be here for at least a brief period of time with you. This past year, as you know, has been like no other. The devastating impact of COVID-19 is something we continue to see globally every day. It's changed the way we move through our day, interact, and deliver health and care. It has also impacted the health and wellness of people in our communities, increasing isolation of our most vulnerable populations, highlighting the prevalence of anti-Indigenous racism, and worsening the opioid crisis. For Island Health, the pandemic hit us later than other areas. We were able to learn from what other jurisdictions experienced. We were quickly able to mobilize work already underway, shifting non-essential care outside of hospitals and increasing supports within the community to protect our health system and people in our communities from COVID-19. I'll talk a bit more about this in a moment. But first, I would like to outline our focus for the coming year. Each year, the Minister of Health writes a letter outlining the expectations of Island Health from the provincial government. We expect to see the letter for 2021 in the coming weeks. We know a significant focus will build on the mandate letter provided to the Minister from the Premier to continue to reduce the spread of COVID-19, deliver the immunization program while supporting a culturally safe health system free of racism, and delivering the other key priorities, including implementing primary care strategies, providing integrated community-based health services for seniors, and strengthening long-term care services, improving team-based care for patients accessing mental health and substance use services, and continuing to respond to the opioid crisis. This is in addition to delivering important work regarding population health, diagnostics, surgery, hospital and clinical services, and enhancing digital and information infrastructure. To deliver on these priorities requires partnership with communities, service providers, nonprofit organizations, foundations, and very importantly, regional districts. When I met with the regional hospital district chairs in November, I shared my belief the only way to support the growing needs in health and care is to work together, to support the continuum of health services. Island Health operates more than 150 sites with more than 9,000 beds in acute care, mental health, and residential settings, including more than 160,000 patients per year in hospitals, more than 10,000 home care clients, and over 3.2 million hours of care. Growing and aging populations combined with increasingly chronic diseases are resulting in overcapacity in our hospitals. But that isn't unique to Island Health. Overcapacity is something we are seeing nationally and internationally. Putting pressure on our healthcare system and our communities is one of the reasons why the province is focusing and investing in ways to remove the burden on hospitals and provide more care in the community, including community residential care. With 2 new hospitals, you are in a unique position to expand your support for a full continuum of health and care services. It is this type of focus that will support health and care for individuals, families, and communities at all stages of life. It's a focus our board approved in 2019 as part of the Island Health Strategic Framework to guide our work through to 2025 and one I am thankful we approved, as it was key in our response to the pandemic and supports the provincial focus. When COVID hit, we were able to quickly ramp up existing services by leveraging community care and virtual platforms to support public health orders and COVID-positive patients isolating at home. We expanded the delivery of virtual care from less than 50 clinical programs and services to over 170 to provide people the care they need while supporting physical distancing and travel restrictions. Let me share the experience of one of the early adopters of virtual care. The neurology MS program started using virtual care early in the pandemic. They quickly reduced a one-year wait list to less than a month. For MS patients who have a hard time traveling, being able to meet virtually meant they no longer had to struggle with challenges of getting to and from appointments. For patients in remote communities, having this service meant reduced travel, reduced time away from work, and access in ways they never had before. As a former nurse and healthcare leader, I know these types of technical advancements can result in changes to the way we deliver services and create better care to meet the unique needs of patients. The question is, how can we support the full spectrum of health and care needs on the North Island? Within our Comox Valley and Campbell River Hospital campuses, we have a large number of individuals who are residing in acute care spaces but do not need hospital-based care. These individuals would be better served in community or with community-based restorative rehabilitative care programming. There is also significant need on the North Island to increase capacity in long-term care, assisted living, and group homes, and expanding home care and technology to support people in community close to home. By supporting these types of initiatives, you will be supporting a continuum of care which can have a lasting impact on our system and those we serve. Scott and Max will speak in more detail on the projects planned for your community during your meetings. I am confident you will share our enthusiasm on the path ahead. On behalf of Island Health, I recognize and appreciate your contributions of providing health and care to the people of the North Island. As you begin your strategic planning sessions today, I ask you to consider expanding your support of health and care outside of the walls of the hospital and to focus on the full continuum of health and care needs for the people in the region. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chair Hollins. I'm going to turn it over to James to just overview the Regional Hospital District mandate.
Great, thanks, Allison. So good morning, directors. I am pleased to be able to provide some background information to the strategic planning session, and I'm excited to see how the board weighs its position and options over the next couple of meetings. I would like to extend appreciation to the Island Health staff members and Chair Hollins who are on the call today, as they are the healthcare experts and will be able to supplement some of the information in the briefing notes to help you as directors. My introduction will touch briefly on the CSRHD history, enabling legislation, mandate, and the fiscal position. The Comox Strathcona Regional Hospital District is established through provincial government authority under the Hospital District Act, which was first adopted in 1967 and provides for capital cost sharing between rural and urban areas. At the time, hospitals were the main focus of the cost sharing arrangement. And while the Hospital District Act is in need of updates to reflect the 21st century, the legislation provides regional hospital districts with the ability to partner with health authorities to respond to local needs. Some of the purposes of a regional hospital district, as outlined in the legislation, are to establish, construct, operate, and maintain hospitals and hospital facilities, and to grant aid for the establishment, construction, operation, and maintenance of hospitals and hospital facilities. It's important to note that the Act defines hospitals as, in part, an institution or facility in the health field that is designated by the minister as a health facility. The CSRHD's current mandate is to provide 40% capital funding support to Island Health for acute care facilities. The CSRHD also contributes $5,000 annually towards 6 smaller community health centers and clinics in the North Island. So while the CSRHD's mandate focuses on acute care facilities, the legislation does provide for a more broad approach as long as the minister names the recipient facility. And that is currently happening in other jurisdictions. In 2020, the CSRHD requisitioned $17 million as follows: $10.7 million for debt servicing, primarily for the North Island hospitals in Campbell River and Courtenay, nearly $2 million for healthcare grants, and then minor operating expenses and the remainder as a reserve contribution. At the end of 2020, the reserves totaled just over $22 million. The CSRHD board recently reduced its requisition for 2021 to eliminate those reserve contributions going forward, primarily to provide some relief to ratepayers amidst the COVID-19 pandemic. The board could increase that requisition in future years as priority projects are identified. Today's session and in February marks the CSRHD strategic planning session, through which the board will explore its mandate and the broader range of capital funding potential for healthcare facilities. Allison, I'm open for any questions that might be at this time, or you may want to begin the introduction of the briefing notes. So thank you.
Thanks, James. I thought I would ask if there are any questions at this time about the mandate.
I have a question. Brenda Lee, Area B. I'm wondering if there is a definite mandate from the provincial government to change the Hospital Act to expand our role, our CSRHD role in the delivery of healthcare. We are, in my mind, still in the realm of capital funding for hospitals and health clinics in our region. And I'm not aware that there's been any change to the Hospital Act to expand that as of yet.
I can try to take that question. So the legislation in the Hospital District Act, it is as I described, and it is fairly broad. Historically, the approach has been for capital and acute care partnerships, though, as I mentioned, some other jurisdictions have broadened their approach. And in order to make that happen, it's the minister that must name a facility to be the recipient of funding. So the legislation does permit the opportunity for a more broad approach. That said, there is also a push amongst regional hospital districts to see a change to the legislation, which hasn't occurred to this point.
Okay, so it hasn't occurred, and the minister would have to name a facility that we would be funding, and that has not occurred. So this is hypothetical today, really.
I think the request would need to go to the ministry, and my understanding is in other jurisdictions, the minister has named health facilities.
Thanks, James and Director Lee. Any other questions regarding the mandate?
I do.
Yes, please.
I'm sorry, Director Anderson?
Thank you. Really, as a follow-up to Director Lee's question then, so one, if we identified in conjunction with Island Health new facilities that we wanted to construct, revitalize, repair, whatever it might be, we could then request that the minister name those facilities, if I understand. They don't have to be already existing named facilities. Correct me if I'm wrong. And then, so does that then indeed limit our participation to capital? Is that at least a form that provides limits? We're not looking to get into operations, is that correct? And if that is correct, then I look forward to our discussions throughout, because there are a number of realms of service in the briefing note that, in my mind, don't really center around facilities or the increase need in those realms aren't around facility creation or expansion. So just wanting to get clear that we are indeed working still within the realm just of bricks and mortar, and that those anticipated facilities could indeed be named at a future time by the minister rather.
So my understanding is those facilities could be named by the minister, and that has been done in other locations. I also understand that most other locations focus on the capital component, and certainly that's been the experience of this regional hospital district, is to focus on that capital component. The legislation does appear broad, but I think the focus for this board has historically been on the capital component.
And so then it would inherently need to be in conjunction with either Island Health or nonprofit facilities to operate and deliver whatever is in those bricks and mortar facilities. Is that correct?
Island Health is certainly in the operational realm, and I'm not sure if anybody from Island Health would want to provide a bit of context on that. But certainly the operational aspect is with Island Health.
Yeah, I can comment to that. We wouldn't ask for cost sharing on a capital investment without having some operating dollars to support service delivery within that capital investment in some way, shape, or form.
So Scott, just to clarify, so you're talking about operating coming from Island Health?
Correct.
Right, thank you. Director Cornfield.
Just to clarify on Brenda's question on the legislation, and we have repeatedly asked, as your board chair, for the minister to sit down and having dialogue about it. We've also pushed both at AVICC and UBCM for meetings of the chairs around the province, because the need to update the act is, in our opinion, important to provide that clarity. To date, the minister has declined to meet with any of us, and his staff have indicated that it is a low priority in terms of healthcare. So we have done our part to ask for the legislation to be updated and amended, but to date it's fallen on deaf ears.
Thanks, Chair Cornfield. Director Adams?
Thank you. And to following up on our chair's comments, it's just reinforcing what my position is on this, and that this is a provincial decision. And to have individual regional districts preempting a provincial responsibility on amending the Hospital Act, I think takes us away from what our focus and responsibility is. I certainly appreciate that there is a huge demand and need for more extended care facilities. And Ms. Holland, you've heard me advocating for the space at the Campbell River Hospital site for a number of years now, but it's taking the regional district into a financial role that we have not gone before, and is putting that additional tax burden on all of our residents. I would also say that probably the most pressing health issue right across the province is mental health and addictions. And while there's a need in long-term extended care, the impacts that are having throughout our communities of mental health and addictions is an area that is of far more urgent need to address some of the social issues that are going on right across the country. So I would challenge that rather than picking off individual regional districts to make amendments to the Hospital Act to then contribute financially into an area that they have not done previously, needs to be pushed back to the minister from right around the province as to how we're going to do this, that it's consistent and fair right across the province, so that all regional districts are on the same playing field, and it's not those that are contributing the money get the projects and those that are not don't. And I know that's not the intent of this, but it can easily go down that slippery slope. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Adams. Just if, I think we're fully aware that there's a lot of discussion needed on this topic. And that's really why we've provided this time today for discussion of the individual Island Health Services and amongst the directors in the breakout rooms and then in a plenary session. So there will be time for that. So if I could just ask if there are any questions around the mandate of the Regional Hospital District, and so that we can just feel that there's clarity amongst the directors. You might not agree with it, you don't want to support it, that's fine, but we just want to have a sort of clarity that we understand what the Act enables the Regional Hospital District to do at this time. So are there any questions of James about that? And
Good
I
morning.
see Director Abram has his hand up.
Yep, it's been up for at least 3 speakers.
Yes, you were
thanks,
just
Allison. Good to
you
hear
were
from
just
you.
at you were number 3 in the list.
Number 3 of one of the ones you saw. What James read and what we're talking about right now, and what the question that you just asked, if you read in the briefing notes, CSRD history and background, the 2 bullet points seem to me to be pretty clear that the province has left it completely open for us to establish, acquire, construct, reconstruct, enlarge, operate, and maintain hospitals. And then it goes on to say that, must be a designated facility. Well, I think both North Island hospitals are most likely designated by the minister as a health facility. So, this creates a real conflict in my mind as to which method are we using? Are we doing capital, which is what we have always thought we were doing, or are we doing capital and operation? That's probably going to be, my major question throughout the day today, because the way the Act is written, the way it was just read to us very clearly by James Warren, very clearly states in those 2 bullets that we can do those things. Now, whether we want to or not is another matter, but is the province mandating that we do them, or is the province saying, if you want to? I don't see that in there. So you asked if we're clear on the mandate. No, I'm not.
James, anything you want to add to that?
I think I could say that the legislation is as summarized on the history and background here, the legislation. Then the RHD's mandate is to provide 40% capital funding support for acute care facilities. So those are, I think, the 2 statements to make, and then the purpose of the strategic planning here is to explore the briefing notes that are included and have the board have that conversation around either expanding its mandate or not.
But who created the mandate is what I'm getting at.
The Strathcona Regional Hospital District's mandate is defined by policy and past practice of the RHD within the legislative bounds.
So that's strictly us saying that's what we're going to do, but the Act actually says there are other things that we could or should do.
Chair Cornfield.
Okay, I'm not wanting to keep prolonging this discussion, but maybe to bring some context to it. We used to have and we were part of the Upper Island Union Board of Health, which was a very active and looked at operations and everything else. And that was changed when they created the regional health authorities. And at that time, it was defined, this is where it comes from, as the 40% of capital, because we used to be involved in operations, used to be involved with each hospital had its own board of directors and its own administrator. When that changed, with the creation of VHA and Fraser Health, Northern Health, all of those, it was clearly defined what our role was to be, and that was on the 40% capital funding on the named facilities. And so it's the difficulty that our regional health authority is constraining is when you look at the continuum, which hopefully every group will get into discussion on what does healthcare look like, is that, I needed to bring in one other part, is that we staff surveyed every regional hospital district in the province to see what they considered their mandate was, and it varied quite a bit over the province, but the most consistent was this 40% contribution to capital. There has been some regional hospital districts that have branched on into others, Victoria or Capital Regional District being one, but also places like Powell River and a couple more in the interior. The difficulty is that Island Health can't borrow money, so they view us as a source of being able to provide funding or underwrite the cost of some facilities that they see as needed. So hopefully that provides some context of where we've been and where we're going. And I think we really need to get into our breakout rooms and roll our shirt sleeves up and start slogging away.
Mr. Chair, can I just say one thing? I feel really uncomfortable with this 2-day strategic planning process. I, chair the library board, as you know, for the past few years, and we went into significant planning for a couple years and made a master plan of what we wanted to do. And I think it's incumbent upon our hospital board members to come up with a very detailed assessment of what the needs are and the plan over, not just in a snap 2 meetings, we're going to go and plan long-term care or something, but we're going to do it properly and plan it. And from our own point of view, not from Island Health.
Director Lee, just on the last remark, we're in partnership with Island Health.
Well, if we are, where did our pathology
Director Lee, in future, would you raise your hand when you wish to speak? Because I have both Noba Anderson and Jim Abram whose hands were up.
How do I raise the hand? I don't see any hand thing.
Go on to the participants list and it's in the bottom right corner.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
Any other, sorry, were you finished speaking?
Well, Brenda.
I just want to have better planning.
Put your hand up, Brenda.
Okay, there I go.
Yeah, thank you. I have Director Anderson and then Director Abram. And I will note Director Lee, though her hand is not yet up, but that's fine. We'll put you on the list, Director Lee. So
I don't know why not.
Anderson, and again, I would just really try to ask you to focus on the mandate itself at the moment.
Absolutely. And I'm aware I'm a second time speaker, but I'm just trying to get, the more we talk about this, the less clear I am, to be honest. So I go back to the briefing note and it looks to me, regardless of past practice or what other hospital districts are doing, it looks to me like we could construct and operate a facility, because it's not just hospitals. Any named facility or community health centers are a named facility, without the VHA's financial involvement, but just with the naming of the minister. I'm not suggesting we do this. I'm just trying to truly understand the shape of the container that we're working within. Because if we can establish, construct, and operate something with the minister's naming of it, could we, for instance, build and delegate the operations to a nonprofit or a private enterprise within our community to do a rehab center, to do an addiction center, to do to build and operate an extended long-term care facility? I'm And again, I'm not advocating that we do these. I'm just really trying to understand the parameters of this discussion that we're about to enter into.
Thanks, Director Anderson. I really appreciate that. And maybe I could just ask one of the staff from Island Health to, if they can offer some clarity on some of the questions that you've heard. Scott, are you prepared to speak to that?
Yeah, just on that latest question, you're right. The legislation would allow for that kind of investment if the regional district saw it as something they wanted to do. However, it's unlikely that the minister would designate a facility that were not operated or in some way overseen by Island Health, just because of the regulatory risk that might be a result of us not having oversight of that facility. So I think it's safe to say that yes, it's possible, but the minister would likely not designate one of those facilities.
Scott, at the current
time, 100% funding, both capital and operations, if VHA ran it and designated as such. Again, not advocating, trying to get clear.
Correct. The way the legislation is written, that would be allowed. If we endorsed it, the minister signed off on it, and the regional district wanted to fund it.
So what I'm hearing is really the sky's the limit as long as we have Island Health's blessing.
And the minister's blessing as well. Correct.
Understood. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. That's really helpful. Next on the list is Director Abram.
Thank you very much, Allison. I just want to be real clear. I am not advocating for us taking on operation. I was only pointing out that there is a conflict in what we have been presented so far. We need to sort it out. With regard to Director Anderson's comments and the answer by Scott, I think that the one key point that Scott, you kind of slid over was designated by Island Health and the minister, but you didn't say funded, partially funded. So would the funding formula still fit for that, say, addiction center in an area if the mandate of the regional district changed to allow for those things and Island Health and the minister approved it? Would that also have to include partial funding?
Scott, are you? Can you respond to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So if I understand your question is if the regional district were interested in funding the capital and operating of a, let's say, for example, mental health facility, would Island Health then be required to fund it? Is that your question? Or is the question,
yeah, same funding.
Go ahead.
Same funding formula as we have now. So it's 40-60.
So in a situation where Island Health were interested in opening a new mental health facility in the community and the regional district were interested in funding either the capital or operating, I would assume that the same funding formula would apply if Island Health were interested in pursuing that as a facility, for sure.
Okay. Thank you very much for a very straight answer. Thank you.
Thanks to both of you. Director Lee?
Yes, I would just like to say that I think our hospital board needs to have remain autonomous from Island Health's decisions. We put $3 million into a capital plan for our new hospitals. Our hospital board paid for that, and then we ended up getting reimbursed in the long run. But we had plans for and hundreds of thousands of dollars invested in different locations in the hospitals that were subsequently, some of them just taken away without consultation, and they were taken away by Island Health. And that is not a great partnership, in my opinion. And I think that we need to have better communications with Island Health, and also that we need to make our own master plan about what our local taxpayers want and can afford, and make a really good master plan that we're going to follow, and we're going to advise Island Health what they are. And over, this to me is scary, doing a 2-day workshop and making big decisions about where we want to go in the future without really studying it, without really looking at, well, what are our policies? Are we going to invest in private facilities that could just, sell the facility off to some corporation in China? How much control are we going to have over the facilities that we invest in? I mean, we've lost in Campbell River, we lost mental health, pathology, renal services. Those were all promised in our plan that we put to the Treasury Board, and those were promised. And we funded them and we built those facilities, and Island Health took them away.
Thank
without
you.
consultation.
Dr. Lee, I'm just going to ask you if you can just save some of these comments to the breakout groups where there'll be good opportunity for everyone.
I just don't want the board to make any snap decisions over a 2-day workshop when there's so much involved.
I hear you. And that's in part why we've just laid out today an opportunity for us to just kind of discuss some of the basic foundational information, and for directors to have an opportunity to discuss with each other. And on the sort of your comment about building relationships and partnerships, I think we're all quite very grateful that we have the chair of Island Health and 4 staff members today to help us work through some of these details. Chair Kornfeld, perhaps you will be the last question about the mandate.
Thank you, Allison. Just to remind the board that this isn't our first strategic planning session. I think this is your 3rd one that you've tried to help us with. Am I correct?
I think so, yes.
Yeah, and over the last number of years since the hospitals were built, this process is going to take time, but it's something we have been working on, and it's not done in just the 2 days. Last thing is on the 60-40 split and where that came from. Every regional district, when they were created, was given the choice of 60-40 on highways or hospitals. Most regional districts in this province chose hospitals. The lower mainland, or whatever that regional district is down there, chose highways. That's why you see all the big fundraising drives, and their funding formula does not apply to hospitals. So ours, we selected, as did the vast majority of regional districts in the province, selected hospitals as a 60-40 split with the province. So that's where the 60-40 comes from. And then maybe we can get into seeing what the board wants to do from here.
Thank you, Chair Kornfeld. I'd like to just suggest we take a quick break, a 10-minute break. We'll reconvene at 22, and we'll come back and we'll work our way through the briefing notes. Does that suit everyone? Reconvene at 10:20, or sorry, 10:40.
8 minutes.
See you in 8 minutes, everyone.
Perfect. Did you stop the live recording? Was it recording while we were on break? Thanks. We'll call everybody back together. The next thing that we wanted to do was to walk through the briefing notes. And I just wanted to say by way of introduction, these were prepared really with the intent of just trying to provide a picture of the healthcare system. It wasn't certainly on my part in this. Scott from Island Health and the other staff were involved in preparing some of this information, and thank you to them for that because it was really helpful. But for my part in this, the intention was not to suggest areas where the regional hospital district might want to be involved. There was no direction intended by presenting these. It was more to just provide a snapshot, a glimpse into the whole spectrum of healthcare, just to provide an overview that would then ground the discussion of the regional hospital district. Where we have tried to provide some specific information is at the very bottom of each of the briefing notes in answer to the question, what are the opportunities in this service area? That does identify some areas where Island Health has some intentions or plans or where they see opportunities for their work, and whether the Regional Hospital District Board wants to or chooses to get involved is completely within the purview of the Hospital District Board. So just with that introduction. So my intention is to just very quickly, for my part, just to identify what's in the kind of the highlights of each of these briefing notes. I'll ask Island Health, Scott, I'll go to you if there's anything that you want to comment on in each of them, particularly where there is some opportunity identified by Island Health, and then we'll just open it for questions. I'll also just say we've planned half an hour to go through the 8 briefing notes, which is probably ambitious, and we'll just have to see how this goes. So the first one is acute care and inpatient. We started with this one because this is the one that the Regional Hospital District Board is probably most familiar with. Really, the focus of this is on hospital facilities and inpatient care. I assume that you've gone through these briefing notes. I won't cover the detail. The 2 big facilities, of course, as you well know, are in Campbell River and Comox, the Comox Valley campus and the North Island campus. And then if you just look at the what are the opportunities in the service area? Oh, I'm sorry. The extent to which the Regional Hospital District is involved is there. Again, it broadly amounts to 40% of the capital funding. The details are there. And then in terms of Island Health's plans, there at present are no intentions to undertake any significant capital improvements, though there may be some small capital improvements taken on annually. Scott, is there anything you want to add to that?
Thanks. Maybe I'll just reserve my comments until we've gone through them all because they kind of integrate with one another.
Okay, great. Any questions about this from the board members? Director Hamir?
Thanks, Chair, or thanks, Alison. Just a question around, the capital projects for the acute and inpatient care. This board was hearing about, an not enough room in hospitals at certain times, even pre-COVID. So I just want to clarify that space is no longer an issue, or are there any or is that under something else? If the Island Health is looking at upgrading bed space and making them more available, or if that has been figured out.
Scott, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, sure. I'll reserve comments until the end, but just on that point, certainly our hospitals across the island are near or over capacity. But the primary driver of a lot of that overcapacity is patients that would be better cared for in the community. So rather than build more acute care space that is far more expensive to build and operate, it makes more sense to invest in community spaces that are more appropriate for those patients, so provide higher quality and more appropriate care, but B, are far more economical to build and operate. So yes, it's an issue, but the solution is not building more hospital beds.
Thank you for that.
Thanks, Scott. Director Evans.
Thank you. And this is just more or less a comment for all of the reports. Thank you for breaking them out this way. It certainly made them easy to consider in review. But one thing I was hoping, and this might be coming in stage 2 of our strategic planning, but was more a sense of where the gaps and where the trends are in terms of service needs. Are we planning on looking at what is happening currently in all these areas of service, current service delivery, and then some way to be able to encapsulate how our communities are changing and what we're projecting for the types of service needs we're going to look at in the future? Is there going to be any of that type of information provided to the board?
I'll just say that, again, from my part in this, what we did focus on was on capital opportunities for capital, and the needs as identified by Island Health, we've hoped to capture in the opportunities section of each of these. So that was kind of the extent of the information that we looked for.
Okay, and I appreciate that, and thank you for restating that, but I still think that that information also informs capital. It all really is about patient care, and understanding that would be information that would, I think, support the board in decision-making moving forward. So I still feel that that's something that would be valuable. And again, it's just to be able to make informed decisions, whether they are on capital or however we move forward with our mandate. An annual overview in terms of that information, I think, would be seen certainly by myself. I'm not sure if other board members would feel that way, but I certainly think that that would be valuable.
Yeah, thanks for that suggestion, because we are trying to understand the kind of information that the board feels it needs. So if that, and that's perhaps something you can discuss in the small groups, if that's something that's broadly felt as being helpful, then we can turn our minds to that for the next meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll maybe go to the next one. Not seeing any more questions about this. It's home and community care. These are services that are, delivered in the community. And maybe I can just go right. Currently, the regional hospital district is not currently involved in these services. No capital funding goes to them at present. And although Island Health sees that there may be some small capital improvements as a result of lease consolidation in a couple of locations, they don't see significant capital spending going into this area in the near future. Again, Scott, I won't call on you every time, but if there's anything you want to add, just pipe up. Any questions about home and community care? Okay, we'll move on to primary care, community care, rural facilities. These are probably facilities that and care that you were all really familiar with, the kind of care that takes place right in your communities most often. You can see the range of facilities provided currently, both Island Health facilities and not-for-profit clinics across the hospital region and private clinics as well. As James noted earlier, the Regional Hospital District provides grants of $5,000 to each of 6 clinics in the region. They're listed there. And there's no significant capital projects planned in the immediate future by Island Health in this area. Oh, sorry, Director Anderson. Thanks, Chair. Sorry, Director Anderson, I see your hand up, but you're muted.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
I just minimized something inadvertently. My question here will apply to a couple of the others topics, and so I'll just make it generally that if we're indeed looking at a collaborative opportunities between Island Health and the hospital district, and what we have in front of us are potential capital opportunities as identified by Island Health, where is the opportunity for the hospital district to put forward potential plans? So that there might be, for instance, an addition needed to, like a capital addition needed to one of these community health centers, or a community might have interest in building, a rural community in building an extended home, a residential care facility of some kind. So where's the opportunity for us to identify potential capital opportunities and pitch them, if you will, to Island Health? And then that comes back to us needing better data around what are the opportunities in our community, because I certainly can't pitch something on Cortez Island and expect you to go for it if we don't have a comprehensive sense of what opportunities exist as identified by our communities as capital ventures that we'd love to see happen. Because there's certainly ones I would put forward, and I guarantee I'm not alone.
Yeah, thanks. That's a good question. Scott, or someone else from Island Health, are you able to talk about the kind of planning process you go through and how you involve communities in that process?
Yeah, so certainly our capital planning is driven by clinical operational service planning. So we rely on our clinical leadership to dictate what the future state looks like for their communities, and certainly they would include community consultation as part of that. If they haven't directly linked with a specific director, I'm sure Max would be happy to chat directly with you so that your thoughts are integrated into his future vision for the community. But certainly we would prefer that clinical service needs drive capital investment and not the other way around.
So this is a kind of planning that Island Health does. It has not historically been the kind of planning that the Regional Hospital District does. And so the expectation would be that community consultation, and when you're saying clinical healthcare needs, I'm assuming that involves the professionals and your planning staff, and the healthcare providers are involved in that planning. So that's where the planning takes place in the Island Health world, not in the Regional Hospital District world. Is that correct? Is that how you see that, Scott?
Correct.
Yeah.
So what I'm noting then is there is a gap, because I've been in contact with lots of Island Health people over the decade plus I've been in office, but I've never had somebody from Island Health, to my knowledge, approach either me or the Health Association here or the Seniors Association who has seniors housing, and on, and say, what are your anticipated community needs over time for either capital or service delivery? And I can guarantee you there are capital needs seen by this community, but I don't know what Island Health planning process that would be plugged into. So I think there's a gap in communication there.
Thanks, Director Anderson. Any response from Island Health?
No, I think if you haven't been consulted in the past, then that's a gap for sure, and certainly we'll try to plug it.
Thanks, Scott. Director Unger.
Yes, thank you. Just a question under facilities and equipment involved in this service. Just wondering why the Gold River Health Clinic isn't named there.
Well, that's likely just a clerical oversight.
Okay, just double checking. Thank you.
Sorry, I missed your question. Gold River Health Clinic is identified as one of the facilities that's funded by the by the Regional Hospital District. Oh, but it's not in the other list. Yes, you know what, I'll take responsibility for that. It's probably my oversight. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Director Davis.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to clarify, it says here that it's unconditional grants of $5,000. Does that include service as well as capital costs?
James, can you help with that one? Or Mariah? They're unconditional grants of $5,000 to each of the health clinics. Can it go to operations and capital?
Through the chair, my understanding is that's really undiscretionary, like those facilities can use them as they wish.
Right. So yeah, so they're used for whatever the health facility chooses to use them for.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to the next one. Oh, sorry, Director Abram, are you wanting to discuss primary care? You're muted,
Sorry.
Director Abram.
I know. I've looked at this about 4 times now and I'm still confused. Under the second major bullet, it says facilities included Island Health facilities, and then it's got North Quadrant Urgent and Primary Care Center. What is that? Never heard of it. Next line down, or next section down, it's got our medical clinic, which is something that we fought for and got. But I'm just wondering what this is.
Yeah, that's another typo. That shouldn't be in there.
Okay, so it doesn't exist.
It exists in another community.
Oh, okay.
That's interesting. That came off their website. Okay. Thank you for your keen eye, Director Abram.
Yes, sorry. So if you took it off our website, there's a street in Victoria called Quadra, and there is a North Quadra Urgent and Primary Care Center.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Quadra Island.
Right. Thank you. Yes, that probably is where it's from. Rehab Services on the next page. Again, there's a broad description.
Just a moment, please.
You had-
My hand was up there.
Yeah, you had
sorry.
2 hands up.
I'm sorry. Just put my head down for a minute. Director Cornfeld.
Just really quickly, is the $5,000 grant matched with 60%, like $5K from us, and then the appropriate amount equaling 60% of the total? Is it matched by VHA?
No, Mr. Chair, that's a contribution from the RHD only.
Okay, and why would it not be matched?
I think this is a decision that was made by the RHD. In the past, it had been $2,500, and over the last number of years, the board increased it to $5,000, and it's a decision of the RHD.
Okay, and we can do that because it is a named facility, correct?
As I understand it, yes.
Maybe that's a really great question, Mr. Chair. Scott, I made the assumption that these are Island Health run clinics, are they? Or centers and clinics?
Yes.
Yeah, so the funding largely comes from Island Health, correct?
So within each, so if I could just add to that, Chris Sullivan or Chris Scott. So Cortez Health Center, for example, is a not-for-profit, run by a not-for-profit. And Island Health may fund a nurse practitioner. We may have a nurse practitioner in the site. We may have mental health and lab people that go to the site. I don't know exactly who goes to that site, but so that isn't an Island Health owned facility, but rather we have a lease for space in that facility. as an example.
Right. Thank you for that. I think as what I, when I looked at this, what I concluded was that the $5,000 is probably a small portion of the overall funding required to operate these facilities. Director Wally.
Thank you. Just a comment on that $5,000 unconditional grant. Speaking for Sayward, my understanding is that is for capital only, and that's consistent with our regional district policy on funding capital only. Because the local clinic here has asked me for grants to cover operating costs over the years because they can't use that unconditional grant for operating expenses.
Marat?
To the chair, to Director Wally, thank you for that additional information. I will clarify for the next session we have coming up.
Great. Super. Thank you. Director Colborne.
Good morning, everybody. I am just wondering if that is, if there's any information about whether that is used every year or if that's just a placeholder, and also if that rolls over and compounds. Just curiosity.
The RHD does provide that $5,000 to each of the health centers and the health clinic as named, and then it's with the health clinic or center.
So does anyone from Island Health have a comment on that, about if that is in fact used for the most part for these facilities, or not?
For any facility that is budgeted as part of Island Health's operations, we do not carry operating dollars forward from year to year, so it would be used every single year.
And if I can just further, that would be partly to the question of whether it's capital or not. So for instance, if it was $5,000 year after year after year, and there was a $20,000 expansion or something like that that was needed, I'm just kind of trying to work my way.
Yeah, we wouldn't use those funds for a $20,000 expansion. And just from an accounting perspective, anything less than $5,000 is an expense. We expense anything less than $5,000 anyway. So we wouldn't capitalize any of those dollars.
Thank you for that. I don't see any other hands up, so we'll move on to Rehab Services. The Regional Hospital District not involved in funding these, except for where they might take place in an acute care facility. And there's no significant capital projects planned by Island Health in this area. Any questions about Rehab Services? Okay, move on to mental health. Again, the Regional Hospital District isn't involved in funding these facilities currently, or services. I'm sorry, I see a typo there. And there's no significant capital projects planned here again, except for there's a group, as you can see, this is repeated for a number of these services, that there is some thought that there may be some lease consolidation and relocation of facilities, and there may be some capital improvements proposed there. Otherwise, there's no involvement of the Regional Hospital District. Director Morin.
Great, thank you. I just wanted to go back to what Director Adams was talking about earlier. The addiction and mental health kind of strains on communities as well as the healthcare system, and whether there are any plans even in the farther out future to create more health facilities that better meet the needs of folks with those issues.
I have quite a few examples. I'll try not to go on too much from my constituents, as well as personally my experience with having folks in my life with mental health and addiction services, and going into the hospital for a medical issue that is further complicated by the mental health and substance use issues. And I know often the staff in the hospitals are reluctant to discharge folks out who have, maybe their infection or whatever is clearing up, but they know that they're not going back to proper housing, or they're going out into the community without the supports that they need, and for those health issues to be improved. So I know a lot of people have said, why do we not have more of a residential type healthcare facility for people for those complex needs? And I could see that if there was some operational funding that was provided, that could be an area where the hospital board could possibly address some of the capital needs for facilities like that. So that would be my question, with as Director Adams saying, this is such a major issue in our community, and it really impacts everybody, and it's really not being addressed properly. People are getting sicker and sicker. My final thing I would say is that a neighbor said to me yesterday, there's a woman in our community who everyone has seen, who's clearly extremely ill. I've heard she has severe schizophrenia. She's victimized constantly. She's beat up. She goes in the hospital. She has injuries. She comes out. She's really not doing well. It's not a good situation for her at all. It's not a good situation for her health. She's never going to get better in this revolving door kind of system. So I wondered, I know it was a long-winded chat, but I'm pretty passionate about it. It's a huge issue in our community, and I'd like to know if there are some plans to look at the system of care in a different way, to actually have facilities that meet these broader health needs in a compassionate and in a way that provides a real spectrum of services to address these health needs in these complex cases. Thanks.
Thanks, Director Morin. Scott, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, Director Morin, there's not any immediate plans, but in the medium term, there certainly are some changes envisioned to address the issues that you've asked about, and I'll talk to that a little bit more in my summary.
Okay, great, thank you. Director Lee.
Thank you. I just went and grabbed this best of care, getting it right for seniors. It's an ombudsman report which had 156 recommendations to government to address issues that haven't been addressed, especially, well, in all kinds of facilities, long-term care included, for seniors. But I was just reading a section here under people with mental health problems, and that also comes under a different piece of legislation, the Mental Health Act, for admitting people for mental health care. So I've got a disc that goes with this book that people could read if they want to. Like, I could send it to James and it could be distributed, because it has some really good ideas on how, what kind of directions we could go to improve the health of our community and our seniors especially. And, one of the big issues in this book was the hours of care that people are given. But on the point of mental health facilities, I think we need to look at the Mental Health Act as well as the Hospital Act to see what we're allowed to do.
Thank you, Director Lee. Director Kerr.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you,
Island Health for attending the meeting here. I realize that the hospital board doesn't finance any of the mental health or addiction issues, but my concern is more with Island Health does finance a lot of the nonprofits and agencies, and a lot of these groups operate in silos, and not a lot of information comes out from them. So my large concern is accountability. You know, either the board or city councils don't get information about what's happening in their community, and we've got to look at the big picture, the overview of all these issues, and we're not getting that raw data of what's happening, where the overlaps are, to even start to consider what kind of facilities that may be needed. We just don't, we're out of the loop when it comes to that. And I think it is a financing issue. So is there any way of repairing that gap?
Oh, it's a good question. I mean, that sounds more like an operational oversight question, which falls outside of my purview, and I think outside of the purview of the current mandate of the board. But certainly, I can take that feedback back to our operational leaders and see what they can provide to you in that regard.
Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. If we could move on to long-term care. This has been brought up a number of times this morning, so I'm sure there'll be some interest in it. Currently, the Regional Hospital District is not involved in funding this. And as you're well aware, Island Health does have some capital projects in mind. Any questions about this? It sounds like you have discussed this previously, and this is, I would expect this will be one of the areas that you'll discuss in the breakout groups as well. Dr. Lee?
Thank you. Well, one of the questions I have about long-term care, and I have quite a lot of experience. I spent 10 years almost every night visiting a long-term care facility, caring for people and my mother. And I attended Vancouver Island Family Council meetings in Nanaimo, which was an association of the families that discussed how we could improve long-term care for our loved ones. My point is that long-term care, residential care, it's residential care, it's not medical care. Most long-term care homes have maybe one nurse on duty at any given time in the whole building, maybe 300 or 400 residents and one nurse. The one I was visiting had 3 floors and they had 4 licensed practical nurses, but 95% of the personnel in a long-term care home are care aides and they do not have medical training. And it's very difficult to get you know, medical people in to look at your loved one if they get a skin infection or, you know, have an episode of some kind. Really hard to get help medically. So moving somebody from a hospital, and I've seen it happen, where somebody gets moved out of acute care in the hospital to the residential care facility with no medical backgrounds, hardly at all, and they die within, you know, a week or 2 because they don't have the support at the, it's a residence, it's where, it's the home, it's the last home of people who need to have assistance in living. They need assistance in eating and bathing and dressing and all those things. They need assistance, but it's not medical assistance. And, you know, the very idea that, you know, I know it's expensive to have somebody in acute care. It's like $1,200 a night for a senior in the hospital versus like a couple $100 a night in a residential care home. But You know, if they're not going to get the medical support, you're going to, you know, kick them out of the hospital and put them in a residential care facility. We have to look at what kind of supports are there for the people that arrive, because they come in with heart conditions, with cancer, blind, lots of different issues going on, and they're not they don't get the support that you might expect. So, you know, and it really involves integrating family to help out with people, because they only have like 3.5 hours allocated to each resident for like regular care.
Thank you, Director Lee. I don't want, I'm reluctant to interrupt, but I just want to try to focus on what we're trying to do here. And there will be time, if we get to the breakout groups, for you to express your views of this.
Okay, but I'm just saying that I don't know why long-term care is even on our agendas, because they're not health facilities, they're residential facilities.
So this is the question really before the board, and will be going forward. You know, is there an interest in on the part of the board? This is completely within your authority and mandate to decide whether you're interested in this. So that we do expect this discussion to occur, and we hope it will occur in the breakout groups. But if we could just focus on the information on these pages, just so we're all dealing with the same thing, and then we can get to the breakout groups. So Director Adams, and then Chair Cornfield.
Thank you, Allison. And I appreciate your comment of trying to steer the conversation to the breakout rooms, but I think this is really important. We have had this presentation before, and essentially what this is a pay-to-play model. And if we come up with the money, then it'll get us in the queue, and we'll be able to move forward quicker with the long-term extended care bills. And my concern is more philosophical, is to, if we choose to go with this model as the Comox Strathcona Regional Hospital District or Board, or we don't choose to go with it, will that make a difference ultimately in the queue for Island Health as to where they are going to do bills? And I know I've asked this question in the past, and I'm not looking for an answer right now, but I want each breakout room to really consider that question and the position that we're being put in, which is why I said right at the very beginning, this should be a provincial decision, not individual regional districts. Thank you.
So, can I answer that question?
Sure, please, Scott.
Thanks, Director Adams. I think I've answered this before, but let me be totally clear. Island Health's priorities are driven by care needs in the community, not by where there's money to make those investments. So we will be submitting a business case to the Ministry of Health for additional long-term care beds in Campbell River, regardless of whether the CSRHD wants to cost share. It would be beneficial to us if the CSRHD were interested in cost sharing, and if, for example, Campbell River were not a high priority for Island Health, or one of the top priorities for Island Health for incremental investment, the CSRHD could help convince the Ministry of Health to fund a project of lower priority in the CSRHD if there were cost sharing. But your cost sharing does not dictate whether or not long-term care beds in Campbell River are a priority. They are a priority for Island Health. We will be submitting a business case with or without your support. And then it will be up to the Ministry of Health to determine where that fits in their overall provincial priorities. So for us, it's a priority regardless of whether or not it's a priority for you.
And thank you, Scott. And you have said that before, and I very much appreciate that and respect that. I'm more looking long-term when you maybe not be in the position, or Leah may not be the board chair, and we may not be at this board table as to what it sets up for the future. And if it's across the board and equal for all regional districts in the province, as a provincial directive, then that makes it fair and equitable. So, but I appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Thank you to both of you. Chair Cornfield.
And thanks, Allison, and thanks, Scott, for being clear. At the last chairs meeting, we had a presentation on long-term care and what the priorities were, and it was all based on the numbers, what the community needs were, and I believe it was Campbell River area was first on the list, followed by Comox Valley, followed by the other areas in Island Health's jurisdiction. And so I think one of the things that we cannot lose sight is that we built 2 beautiful acute care facilities, but they're acute care. We are over capacity, which means we don't get to provide good acute care or good long-term care because it's filled mainly with alternate level of care people. That's why we're over capacity. And that's the issue that I believe Island Health is trying to address. How do we address that overcapacity in acute care facilities? And how do you do that? And the way to do it is what you've looked at. And it's based on the numbers, not where the funding is available, but what is the community needs. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Director Cornfield. One final brief comment, Director Lee.
Just wanted to ask Scott whether this is going to be a private facility being built in Campbell River, or is it a public, provincially owned facility?
The direction that we've been given to date, and let me be clear, none of these have been approved yet. We're building business cases that go to the ministry. They must review and approve them. But the direction we've been given to date is that all of these must be either Island Health owned and operated, or if they're operated by a third party, must be a nonprofit that's funded by Island Health and overseen by Island Health. But our intent on the Campbell River site would be for an Island Health owned and operated facility.
That's great. Thank you.
Thanks so much to both of you. If we could move to public health. Again, the description is there. The regional hospital district is not involved in funding these facilities at the present time. And again, there is some proposal that there may be some small capital improvements as a result of lease consolidation in the 2 areas. Any questions about this? Director Hillian?
Thanks very much, Allison. I'm just curious about whatever happened to nursing centers. We have a nursing center in the Courtenay area, and when it was originally built and operated in the 90s, it was hailed as a new model of providing community care. And I really don't know whether it's being expanded to any extent in other communities, whether it's a model that we still embrace or not, or if it's just become a bit of an anomaly.
I might ask Max to comment on this, but my understanding is we're sort of shifting in our primary care, which is the care that's delivered at the coalface to the communities, to more of an integrated model where we don't just have one service line located in disparate locations, moving more towards a model where we would have GPs, nurse practitioners, nurses, social workers, mental health workers, physiotherapists, occupational therapists, et cetera, catered to the needs of the community, all co-located in one sort of one-stop shop for patients, rather than having these standalone specialized services that are delivered one-off. I don't know, Max, if you have anything you want to add.
Yeah, that's really great, Scott. Absolutely. When we look what's happening worldwide in other health authorities and other health systems, when we're thinking about how we're establishing public health and primary care networks and primary care supports and supports for individuals who have chronic diseases, these health campuses are what are coming forward and having really great outcomes for populations. And it's all about that collaborative care approach and that type of supports under one larger program.
And if I could just quickly ask if that includes a community development approach, which I think is what was an aspect of the nursing centers that appealed to a lot of people, the idea that you're not just involved in providing care, but you're involved in developing preventative programs and outreach into the community.
Yeah, certainly our public health staff and community health staff are, we like to have community hubs for them as well.
Thanks.
Thank you. And then finally, if we can move to diagnostics. Again, the involvement by the regional hospital district is limited to diagnostic equipment that's located at acute care facilities, and there's no significant capital projects planned in the immediate future by Island Health in this area. Any questions about diagnostics? Seeing none, can you just go back to the questions? What we'll do is,
Scott wanted to wrap it up.
Sorry?
Scott wanted to provide some comments, some summary, overall comments.
Oh, that's right. Scott, sorry, you wanted to offer some sort of global comments? Or
Yeah.
summary comments? Thank you.
Yeah. Just, given that the the bottom line of a lot of these was there's no immediate need, but there is longer term need in all of these areas, and there will be longer term need in all 8 of those service areas. And there's a number of capital investments that are envisioned in the longer term for the CSRHD catchment area in that medium term. So certainly we will have needs in acute care. Our hospitals age, and we are going to have to replace equipment and infrastructure. And to respond to the earlier comments by Director Lee, the way we deliver care in all of these settings evolves over time. So as demographics and community needs change, we need to change the configuration and the way that we use some of our hospital spaces. So, we have hospital spaces in other communities that were built 91 years ago and were used to perform lobotomies, which I think we can all agree was good to eliminate and repurpose for more appropriate surgeries. A more recent example of this, in sort of support of Director Morin's comments, is that we may have a need in the medium term to increase the number of mental health beds in our hospitals, and we would have to reconfigure space to do so. So certainly those mental health needs are on our radar, and in the medium term would be something that would be great for the CSRHD to cost share in. But on those more immediate needs, to our board chair Leah's comments earlier, those are in the community. And one of the items that may require capital in sort of the medium term, as Max mentioned, is the creation of sort of community hubs to co-locate existing community services. And that would sort of better enable coordination and ease of access for patients, including to our mental health teams, our public health teams, and other community-based teams. And that type of change would require some significant capital investment, because generally, we're leasing space and then we have to do tenant improvements, which can cost $300 to $400 per square foot. So they're not cheap. And we would, again, welcome cost sharing in any of those projects in the future if the board was interested. And to that last comment, the only large capital investment that is envisioned in the short term is expansion of long-term care. And as we've said before, and as mentioned by Leah, there's a large number of patients in our hospital that would be better cared for in long-term care. So this investment will not only improve the quality of their care, notwithstanding what Director Lee has said, but also increase capacity in the hospital. And as part of that long-term care development, we're also exploring opportunities for other what are called transitional care spaces, or community rehab spaces that would enable rehabilitating patients who, they're in hospital, they can't yet go home, but they're not quite sick enough to be in the hospital. And it allows them to convalesce in a non-acute setting that's more tailored to rehabilitating them and getting them back up on their feet so that they can go home, rather than remain in hospital or in long-term care. So that, as part of a long-term care development, could provide additional ease of pressure on the hospital. And again, as part of that long-term care development, that could be an opportunity for the CSRHD to cost share in non-acute facility build that's not necessarily long-term care, not necessarily acute care, but sort of somewhere in the middle. As a last opportunity over the last 10 years, we have asked the CSRHD to cost share in about $6.5 million in sustainment and upgrade investment in community facilities such as the Cumberland Health Center, Uculta Lodge, and Cayucit Health Center. And should the RHD be interested in cost sharing, those facilities are going to need sustainment and upgrade investment in future as well. So there's lots of opportunities, although they weren't listed as immediate needs on those white papers. Going forward, there's a vision for change in the community, and it's going to require investment. And we're not, again, to Director Adams' question, we're not here to say that you guys have to provide cost sharing for us to do these things. We want to do these things anyway, but we would be glad to have you along on the journey. So with that, I'll turn it over to Max to see if he's got anything to add before we move on to the next phase of the day. Anything to add?
Scott? Max?
Yeah, no, Scott, just really well said. Just to introduce myself to everyone. So I came out of Alberta. I was in a provincial role where with Alberta Health Services for a number of years, putting together strategy for community care supports, home care, and transitioning care from acute centers into the community. There's some really great I've been here now for 2 months, and there's some really great opportunities to look at investing in some really innovative programming where it does allow those individuals that are currently in our hospital settings here within GO1 to be better cared for and better treated for in the community, and looking at it from a holistic standpoint as well. I heard that we have people waiting in hospital for long-term care in one of our sites for over 6 months, sometimes up to 9 months. And hospitals aren't places where you want to be able to live. With programs such as those restorative and rehabilitative services or ALC within the community type services, it's a quadruple aim where it kind of hits all those quadrants of quality and innovative care where, it's best value for money, it's the best use of our resources, it's innovative, and it has really great outcomes when it comes to experience for citizens, when it comes to experience for healthcare providers as well. And, there's some really great opportunities to be able to implement those. Scott said, and I'm new here, but Scott said that, we have our priorities and those priorities are going to be sent to the ministry regardless. But I think there's probably some added weight around having support from the regional districts around some of those priorities and the shifts of having to make those investments more community focused than hospital. And in the end, it really is a hospital-based investment, right? If you're able to shift a lot of those individuals that are sitting in acute care spaces now into the community, it also frees up those hospital beds to be able to be used as hospital beds and increases throughput when it comes to hospital-based care. So just some supplementary comments there with what Scott said.
Thanks, Max. I have 2 people with raised hands, but I'm going to ask respectfully if you could just hold your comments and questions until we reconvene so that we can go into our groups. If you will indulge me in that. And can you just bring up the screen share again, the questions for the groups? We are going to automatically put you in groups. We hope this is going to run smoothly. Jake has worked studiously to make this work. If it doesn't work right off the bat, we'll make it work. We're going to give you probably about 25 minutes to just review these 8 topics that we've presented to you, the 8 briefing notes. And what we'd like to ask of you is in your group, and there'll be 5 or 6 people in each of the groups, just see if you can identify the top 2 or 3 areas that from your points of view, you think would be of most interest to the regional hospital district to explore potentially for some partnership or some involvement. There may be none. You may say, no, we don't have any interest beyond what we're currently involved in. That's fine. But if you do have some interest in looking at these further, then what are the top 2 or 3? And just back to one of the earlier comments, if you feel you need more information about the areas, what information do you think would be helpful to support your decision making? And in what way would that help you? And so we will reconvene at noon, I think. And we would ask that you identify a spokesperson so that when we come back together, you could just report out on these two questions. So Jake,
Just
you're gonna—
before we break out,
yes,
I had my
Director Lee?
hand up. Under diagnostics, our board has voted a couple times to request that our pathology labs are reinstated and that we be released from the VIPCC private contract. We put capital funds into our facilities for pathology, and we want our pathology services back.
Yeah.
People in
Thank
our
you, Director
community
Lee.
are suffering.
Thank you, Director Lee. So I'm going to get Jake to wave your magic wand, and you should all be deposited into a group. Again, we'll reconvene at noon.
Hey, Jake, can you hear me? Joe?
Hi, James. I can hear you. Hi, Mariah.
Guess we're back in the main one, are we?
We're back.
Apparently.
Yeah, but it sounds lonely. Oh, there's Director Unger.
No one even had to say, beam me up, Scotty.
No. One leg is shorter than the other now, though, Doug.
I'm just glad there were no flies in the room with me.
Remind me next meeting to have a mask I can pull over my head.
I figured if we're getting into the weeds, I might as well have some weeds behind me.
Need some 2,4-D.
What weeds are those we're on?
I don't know, Andy.
Looks like
At least you're not smoking them, having a glass of wine at the same time.
That's where I was going.
Who are we waiting for?
There we go. There we go. Sorry.
Oh, I was muted. I'm sorry. There we go. So we'll call us back to order in this, the main room here. Thank you all. Jake and I got to spy on group 1, I think. Really,
Group 3. Yeah.
Group 3. Just a fantastic, rich conversation. So thank you for those who were in that group. And we have 4 groups. I'd like to ask the spokesperson from each group to take a few minutes to just summarize your conclusions. We will, of course, take some notes, and that will feed into the next steps. So can I call on group 1, the spokesperson for group 1? You know what? I know I can call on the spokesperson from group 3 because Director Hillian, you were all prepared, I think. So maybe I could call on you first. You'll be the role model.
Sure. Thanks very much. So obviously a limited time, but everybody did get to respond to the questions. Strong interest in our group in further services for mental health and addictions, long-term care, concern for the lack of specific men's health services, concern for hospital transition to community, and the quality of supports that are available there. In some cases, adamant opposition to expansion of the current mandate, concern about provincial downloading, and also about the future needs in our hospitals from COVID and other situations. Also, support for our rural facilities is a strong feature. I don't know that we had time to develop a consensus, but nobody strongly advocated that we should be putting money into these program areas beyond what we're doing just now. But we certainly, I think, want to have some influence over Island Health and government policy in terms of providing these services, given our acute awareness of the pressing needs in all of these areas. So I think I'll leave it at that for now.
Perfect. Thank you, Director Hillian. Can I go back to group 1? Is there a spokesperson for group 1?
Nominate Nicole.
We
See if I
don't
can
know
get
group 1.
Were you going, Jay?
Sorry, Director Minions, are you going to speak? Thank you.
I thought I heard Director Abram for a second there. For the most part, we said it's obviously a very tricky situation, and we're kind of setting the stage and a future precedent for the hospital board for many years to come. And so while we had the similar couple of things come up, acute care was the #1 thing that we need to make sure we cover the gaps on that are still possibly coming up. But mental health and addiction was one of the main ones everyone could agree on. Home care and community care is also very important to help with the acute care challenges. And then long-term care. But for those 3 things, almost everyone agreed that it's probably something we need to be advocating for more than actually looking at funding, or at minimum, there's a lot of information out there that we would need to find about what's going on in our communities. But there was a lot of hesitation to say that we should be expanding our capital mandate. Some very important issues that we need to be talking to the province about funding.
Perfect. Thank you.
I would just add to that as an answer to the second question around information gaps. There was some discussion about if we're going to be entering into potential funding, that we would need to have a lot more information of the metrics Island Health was using to determine their priorities, and then whether there was any possibility for communities to participate or add information into that strategic planning process that Island Health might not be aware of from a community perspective.
Great. Thank you, Director Anderson. Group number 2, do you have a spokesperson?
I believe we were 2.
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, yeah, it was much the same. I think that Chris from Island Health explained a little bit of what Charlie was talking about with the study in 2003 and how they changed the definition of capital. So there is opportunity to work in partnership with Island Health on some of these initiatives, but Island Health themselves get their marching order from the province, and this is where the discussion around the long-term care in Campbell River came from. And it always pays, if we do go down this road at all, to make sure that your grant funding ask meshes with the government's priorities. And in this case, it is where the Island Health want to go on that issue. We had discussion around housing, which is of course linked to mental health and addiction. And the fact that, the municipalities, of course, bear the brunt of all the spin-offs from homelessness and addiction issues. So really, we own it anyway. I think a couple of us felt that right now, we don't have enough information. We're kind of feeling around in the dark, so to speak. But these are, whether or not we want to expand this or not, it can be a slippery slope. So therein lies the rub. We have two minds on this, because in one sense, we do have $20 million possibility, if we didn't do the cut this year, of about $25 million that we could put towards something tangible for our community. And of course, the top 3 would be senior care, getting people out of acute care beds and freeing that up, as well as the other issue around the opiates and so we got three pillars, I guess, be mental health and opiate addiction, like you talk about men's health, because this seems to be predominantly a male issue, men dying, and explore what we can do. But we need a lot more information, and we certainly need a lot more communication with our health authority. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Grieve. And group number 4.
Yeah, I'll be speaking for group 4. I think I took the note. So I'm going to echo what has already been said, that I think our group was quite reticent about committing dollars from the hospital board into areas where the mandate is provincial, and the slippery slope that, as was mentioned, that can cause when we don't want to do that pay and then we'll get services model. But as was said, in certain areas, we see the need, and we see that what's happening right now isn't working. And so we also, really wanted to stress how much we need more information, specifically around what is happening in terms of post 8 years after our debt to the hospital is repaid. What is the asset management, and how much will that the hospitals require for us to keep aside in reserve? We don't have a lot of information on exactly what, and I will name sort of the areas. There was a lot of interest on mental health and addictions, and in long-term care. And as was mentioned by Director Unger, we don't actually know what our rural health clinics, what their capital upgrade requirements are. That has not really been brought up to the board in my couple of years being on this board. So until we have some of this information, there really wasn't there was a reluctance in committing dollars until we know exactly where the need was, and where the province was going to be investing, and what shortfalls there may be. So I'll leave it there, unless I left anything out from the group.
Oh, you did good.
Great, thank you very much. So if I gather all that up, there's some reluctance to expand the mandate at the present time. There's definitely sounds like there's a need for information. If there was to be any consideration of this at all, communications and information would need to come along with it. And then all of the groups talked about some of the areas of interest that seemed to rise to the top, and I just would conclude that they were all, you considered all of the 8 areas of importance, but mental health, that was clearly repeated, the acute care, long-term care, combination clearly is of interest, home and community care, and rural needs. Maybe those were the ones that floated to the very, very top. So thank you for that. A very interesting discussion. Anything that Island Health, any of those of you who were in on those conversations, any comments that you would like to make?
I'd just like to thank everybody for their comments. It's great to hear the local perspective and input. And one of the things that I've heard very clearly and multiple times from members of this board is the concern about provincial downloading, and I totally appreciate that concern. I certainly think there's a significant value in our partnership. So I would just ask, if you're concerned about downloading, are you also potentially concerned about uploading? And we know that in the Lower Mainland, responsibility for funding hospitals was taken away from the regional districts, and would just ask you to consider the impacts of your decisions with respect to what the central government might do longer term around uploading if downloading is also a concern. So just want to flag that as a risk too.
Sorry, thank you, Scott. I have Director Hillian and Director Adams with their hands up. Director Hillian?
Thanks, Allison. I think it's quite remarkably evident that we're all very close to being on the same page. And I think that actually sets us up well for delving further at our next session into how we better communicate with, advocate to plan with Island Health and the province around the many unmet needs in our healthcare system.
Thank you, Director Hillian. Dr. Adams?
Thank you, and really appreciate Scott's comments regarding be careful what you wish for on the uploading part, and I think that's where I would suggest to this board that we continue to work with Island Health on a proposal to the provincial government as to what changes they can make in the Hospital Act that are province-wide that maybe change that percentage. Like we're at 60-40 right now. If we're going to expand into other areas, or the provincial government is going to expand the mandate into other areas, what does that look like? What's the percentage, and what would be the impact on the regional districts? So I'm not closing the door on it, but it needs to be something done on a provincial basis that's equitable right across the province and consistent.
Thank you, Director Adams. I see Director Abram and Director Arbor after Director Abrams.
Thank you, Allison. And I think the groups all did pretty much have very similar comments that were brought forward to you. There was one comment, though, that was made by Director Greaves' group. I don't remember what number that was. But anyway, the comment was, I believe it was related to us saving whatever the number was, $40 million or something in COVID related issues. And therefore we had $40 million to spend. I do not agree with that at all. That money that's money we saved, and we don't have to necessarily requisition. So I don't really think that it's just money available to add to another program. That isn't ours right now. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Director Abram. Director Arbor.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think we can, I'm in favor of continuing the discussion, as most people are. But I think it doesn't have, sometimes you get locked into the existing model and relationships around the capital funding formula we currently have for hospital and things like that. But one thing I mentioned in our group was over the last 5 years, I don't know about the Strathcona Regional District, but in the Comox Valley, we established a new relationship and model around housing. Whereas it used to be just a provincial responsibility. And we created a service that helps the province of BC and BC Housing identify projects. We often put early capital money and also act to bring all the different interest groups together on a regular basis to assess opportunities and needs. So there may be different models and relationships that add value other than just boxing ourselves in the typical, we would just sign a big check and go away. Maybe we could sign a small check, but also do a lot of the stuff that local government is good at, which is really having the ear to the ground, really understanding the community need and supporting Island Health and those identification and prioritization of scale and scope of projects. That could be a small step anyways if we don't go for the full pie. That's my comment.
Thank you. Director Grieve and then Director Cornfield, or Chair Cornfield.
Yeah, I'll be brief. I think the takeaway from this is the need for a really honest communication between the health authority and the regional hospital districts. We live in different worlds. I heard that talk of uploading, but you have to remember, as municipal governments, we're pretty well locked into an archaic system of taxation due to the 6%, 7% of the tax dollar that we actually get to spend. And so we really don't have the same levers to raise capital that federal and provincial governments do. So we have to be very cautious how we spend our meager funds. That being said, I think it's very refreshing that we had such a frank and open discussion. And I think we need more of that going forward. And then we can decide what we're going to do in the long haul. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Grieve. Chair Cornfield? You're muted, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just very quickly, I think we're all interested in making sure our communities get the appropriate level of service in what areas our communities need. It does bounce through the whole continuum, but rather than, I guess I try and focus on how do we make that happen. one way is through funding. That's the traditional way that we've done it in the past, but there's other ways to define our role in advocacy or working with the province to bringing in new partners and maybe even bringing in partner sector in certain aspects of it, but definitely partnering. And I think that there's a lot to be accomplished through discussions with the First Nations Health Authority. And we had them come to our previous board meetings, and I think today would be open in partnering in some of the services that we're looking for our joint communities. So I'm looking forward to the next meeting when we get into the real discussions.
Thank you, Chair Cornfield. Director Lee.
Thank you. I just want to say thanks to the whole board. This board really impresses me because the brain power on our board is phenomenal. And the fact that we all came up with virtually the same answers was really telling. I was really nervous going into this meeting that we were going to get pushed into something we didn't want to do. And everybody was very cautious and thoughtful. And you know, we can do great things as a board. We built 2 brand new hospitals. We need to look at our own services that we're already responsible for. And Director Unger raised a point in our group that we need to look at those smaller health clinics that we give $5,000 a year to. The last time I remember doing any improvement to any of those facilities, any capital, I think we replaced the flooring in Casas when Director McCrae was the mayor of Casas. So that was kind of a long time ago. And we might need to look at what are we responsible for? What do we want to do before we tie our fate to Island Health? We have things within our own communities that we may want to do with the capital that we have. Not to mention expand the hospitals that we built in the future. So, yeah.
Thank you.
But you guys really were, made me feel good. Thank you.
Thank you. Well said, Director Lee. Director Anderson.
I would just offer from what I'm hearing to Island Health, you have a potential really remarkable partner here in the board. But I think that we need to be treated like a partner and feel like we've got information and are involved in, you know, significant discussions and strategic planning, etc. I remember one of the very first days I was in elected office, we at this hospital board, we were contending with the one hospital versus the 2 hospitals, and we advocated really strongly for 2 hospitals and took, I think, a really excellent decision and strong stance, and came to Island Health as, you know, a strong ally with a strong position and a strong funding behind it, rather than just being asked to fund what Island Health comes up with. And I don't by any means want to denigrate the great work that Island Health does in its planning, but I think asking us to participate without knowing that is tricky. And so I would just really invite you to continue to work with us as a strong ally and treat us as such.
Great. Thank you so much, Director Anderson. And thank you for that rich discussion. So I just want to talk about kind of the next steps. And again, this is completely within the board's hands, but this is what we have proposed, is to spend some time with with groups of you, geographic groups. So from Courtenay, from Campbell River, we've grouped some of the electoral areas together. And I would just spend some time on a Zoom call with all of you, just talking about what your community interests are, reflecting on some of the discussion that went today. And then again, that would feed into our next session. And what we have loosely proposed for that, and it is a loose proposal because again, it's just really up to you, is to take some time to reflect on our discussions, come back together, and we'll maybe talk about information as well, or how we can support the board getting the kind of information and the kind of communication that you have spoken of. Like that's a piece that's hanging out there in my mind at the moment, and come back together and we'll kind of reconvene this discussion. and see where we come out there. James, do you want to add anything to that?
I think Allison, that summarizes it pretty well. Today was really about sharing the information and getting some perspective from directors, and I think we've got a lot of good information, and there is, I think, a fair bit of alignment amongst the four groups, which is helpful. And then the conversations that you'll have with the groups will then help just really define what that second session is going to look like and the information we need. So no, I think you've summarized it well, Allison.
Okay, and I think in there somewhere we maybe can see if we can have another conversation with Island Health and just to see if we can fill in some of the gaps here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I already did extend an appreciation to Island Health, but I think it has been great having you part of this and part of the conversation and sharing some of your perspective and hearing the perspective from the directors. So thanks again to the Island Health staff and Chair Hollins, if she is still on the call. So.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I was just going to offer, Scott, are there any further comments that you want to make before I go back to the chair and offer my thanks too?
No, just like to say thank you for your input and feedback. I think what I heard today was, there's some interest in looking at some areas, but still a lot more conversation to be had, and I totally appreciate that. I've also heard that that there's a desire for more connection and communication with Island Health at a local level, and I've just sent a note to Max suggesting a way that we might be able to enable that. I'll just say that we will continue to bring to you what we feel the health needs and priorities for the community are, and we'll leave it up to you whether you decide you want to fund them or not, but certainly we'll endeavor to try and integrate your community's feedback into those decisions up front as best possible before we do. So just thanks again, and looking forward to the next conversations.
Yeah, thank you.
Anything, Max, you want to add?
I'd just like to extend my thanks. Great experience for me. It's nice to have met everyone. Great discussion.
Thank you. Dr. Grace, are you still with us? Any comments you wanted to make? I think she may have gone. So
yeah, she had an urgent issue she had to deal with. So.
No, I totally appreciate that. I just before I turn it back to the chair, I just really want to express my thanks first to the board members, of course. Just really wonderful to have an opportunity like this to have a conversation, even though there was not as much time as I think everyone would have liked. And I want to especially thank the staff from Island Health and your chair and Dr. Grace for being so willing really to be a part of this and to speak so candidly. So really, really appreciate that very much. Turn it back to the chair. So Chair Kornfeld, do you want to bring the meeting to a close?
Yes, we have one new business item before we do, but just before we do that, I want to thank you for participating and getting us through what could have been a difficult day. So thank you for that, Allison, and for the participation by Island Health. I think it's all about relationships. It's all about the partnerships that we build, and it's how do we sustain them. So I look at it as we're all wanting to make sure that our communities receive the most appropriate health services they can. We're a part of doing that. When I look at the accomplishments of this board, when we get focused and maintain that focus over time, that's how we made the new hospitals happen. No one else has been able to accomplish anything like that, but it took a long time. And by my reckoning, close to 17, 18 years. So we made it happen by working together. We had our constituent support. And so there's lots of right ways to get things done. It may be funding in some cases. It may be a different strategy on how we achieve it. And that's where I'm thinking that the next meeting is going to be where we'll get into, okay, if we want to go down this path, what would it take? And what are the things that we need ahead? So if we choose. So Having said that, thank you everyone for participating. Shall we move James back to the regular agenda?
Shall we set the island health people free?
Sure, but it's not a closed meeting, so.
Well, they're welcome to stay on the line if they would like, but I think the only item left on the agenda is the new business that was put forward right at the beginning.
Correct.
I assure you we have lots to do, so we'll sign off. Thanks so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you, Scott.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, guys and gals. Okay, so strategic planning. Do we need any motion? Sorry.
No, the chair conference just wanted to, yeah, no motions are required respecting the strategic planning. I do note that Director Colborne does have her hand up, and then as you noted, we have the one item remaining under new business.
Okay, Director Colborne.
All good. I will lower my hand. That was my question, was process if we needed to accept those briefing notes. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jill. Okay, so no bylaws, resolutions, new business, one item. So Director Abram, do you want to move a motion on your item so we can put it on the floor for discussion?
Yeah, I'd like to move that the emails that I sent to you and to Jake or James or both concerning the photo of the plaque at Campbell River Hospital and the space proposed for the plaque to be moved to be received.
Receipt.
Okay, so moved and seconded. Discussion. Yeah.
Wouldn't
we? So just very quickly, the plaque that was made for both hospitals, it's identical. Just it's there to acknowledge the fact that the board of the day, on behalf of the citizens of the day and of the future, built these hospitals. And the one in Campbell River is in a corner in the entry, back in the corner, next to some other posters, etc. It's completely obscure. Whereas 2 feet away, there's the entryway, I want to call it an archway, but it's squared, so it's not, that goes over to where the desk is, where they check people for COVID. Right on that post is a absolutely perfect spot for that plaque to go. It measures, it fits, and it's completely visible to everybody that walks into and out of our hospital. So I'd like to propose that we ask the maintenance staff or VHA to please move that plaque to that spot.
Okay. So your first motion was to receive. Was it Director Abram?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so we have a motion to receive, was seconded by Director Lee. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Just don't know how to receive something that we.
I didn't oh.
The board, to my knowledge, hasn't received it.
Correct.
The chair and senior staff have received it. And I think I just explained it fairly precisely as to what it is we're talking about. And I'm sure that it could be distributed via email. It's
Mr. Chair, it's Russell here.
Yeah. Go ahead, Russell.
I just want to be that senior staff have just received it today, and had we received it in advance, we would have put it on the agenda as we do either for late items or items that are presented in advance. So my apologies that all the directors don't have it in their hands, but it wasn't possible for us to do for today.
Right. I haven't
if I may,
no, hang on 1 second. We're still under receipt, and I just want to thank Russell for his clarification.
And on receipt.
Trying to close this one off. I have not seen it yet either, Jim. And
Well, Charlie, I sent it to you at least 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, Jim,
Okay,
Jim, I will talk to you separately. I have not seen it. I'm not aware of it. My point is that is this a matter that needs to be dealt with today, or can it be deferred to the following meeting?
No,
So
it
the
could be-
board, so that the board has access to all the information before it's brought up. And so if someone wishes to bring forward a motion to defer or refer to the following meeting, be glad to.
I will make a
Motion to defer.
to defer to the next meeting
Thank you.
so that all staff may see it.
Second.
Thank you. So with that direction, so refer the item to the following meeting, and staff have indicated that they will make sure that it is on the agenda with the package distributed as usual to directors. Director Coburn, I've got speaking.
Just on process.
Yeah.
Just on process, just on process wise, would it be a notice of motion or just deferral because the motion's already been made and seconded? I just think that it's important to make notices of motion when things are emergent like this. It was just a process wise.
Take it today as being a notice of motion, which would have been the right way to handle it, but okay. So I have Directors Kerr and Abram. Director Kerr first.
I was just going to make a motion to defer. Take my hand down.
Okay, thank you. Director Abram, closing remarks. Remember, it's deferral, referral.
It was a deferral motion to the next meeting. It was not a notice of motion.
Right.
Secondly, I just wanted to ask a separate question that has to do with this meeting that we just had. It was my understanding that we did pass a motion to have a strategic planning session, but I do not recall us saying that it would be embedded in a regular meeting. I understood that we were going to have a separate strategic planning session, which would have taken place either as, 1, 2, however many days it took, committee of the whole meeting, as opposed to trying to work it into a board meeting.
First, I will take your question under advisement and respond in a minute, but we have a referral motion for the other item. So on referral, is there any further discussion? Seeing none, is there anyone opposed? Seeing none, the motion is carried. In terms of strategic planning, the whole issue was turned over and provided. I think it was Director Adams that said that when we talked about the first thing about setting up strategic planning, a lot of people favored in-person approach, but the board felt that it was more important to do it virtually. I was given a lot of latitude by the board, as was staff, to put together a process. What we came up with is 2 sessions. One is today, which sets the ground rule, trying to make sure everybody's knowledge of each service area is the same, and have some discussion today, followed by more the following week. So I think staff have done a good job at putting together a virtual strategic meeting where everybody's been able to provide their input. So, man, I look forward to being in the next meeting. So if there's no further things, there was no addendum, there's no media questions.
No termination.
Director Adams and Abram both have their hands up.
Okay, Director Adams, having not spoken before I take it. Director Adams, you're muted.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say thank you to staff and thank you to Allison. I thought today virtually went extremely well, and I'm really pleased at how it was conducted. I do not think we need any separate additional meeting. I think we can cover this off, and that's up to staff to set that agenda with you as chair. So thank you. Have a good day.
You too. Director Abram, final comment.
I thought it went very, very well too, and thank you very much. I never had any objection to it being virtual in nature, and it proved that it worked very well. All I was asking about was what the board directed, which was to have a strategic planning session. We didn't give any kind of parameters. So whether it was 1 meeting, 6 meetings, it didn't really matter to me. I was just asking, was it intended originally in the motion to have a committee of the whole meeting that was strategic planning, period, nothing else?
Okay. So on the motion to terminate, anyone opposed? I don't think so. Anyway, take care, guys. Have a great weekend and stay safe